So the name of my Dharma talk is Pilgrimage, the Road to Nowhere. And it happens that I came across the title of somebody else's Dharma talk recently. That Dharma talk was called When the Mind Seeks Nothing, This is Called the Way. And I thought there was a connection between pilgrimage, the road to nowhere, and when the mind seeks nothing, this is called the way. I hope that will be a little bit apparent by the time I'm finished speaking. So as most of you know, I was invited to go to India twice last year, which pretty much blew my mind. I never thought I'd get back to India. So it was pretty amazing that I was going twice. And the first trip was last February to visit the Buddhist holy sites, place where the Buddha was enlightened, where he gave his first Dharma talk, where he died, that kind of site. And the second trip in September was to hear the Dalai Lama teach. And that was also, just both of those were really exciting, wonderful prospects for me. And I thought of both of those trips as pilgrimages. And so I'd like to talk a little bit tonight about pilgrimage and what it is as a religious practice. You could define a pilgrimage. I'm going to define it a little bit narrowly for our purposes. You could define it as a journey to a sacred place for religious reasons. So I'm not talking about pilgrimages to the Baseball Hall of Fame, for example, but I'm trying to stick to religious pilgrimages. And I think we are aware that pilgrimages are found all over religious practice. In all the major religions, there's the Muslims are asked to go to Mecca at least once in their lifetime to do the Hajj. There's the Camino Real in France, Spain, Portugal. That's a Catholic pilgrimage. So this is a known practice. The Buddha himself established pilgrimage as an aspect of practice. In the Parinirvana Sutra, the Buddha said to Ananda shortly before he died, "Ananda, there are 4 places, the sight of which should arouse a sense of urgency in the faithful. Which are they? Here the Tathagata was born is the first." Tathagata is what the Buddha is calling himself. So that's another name for Buddha, and it's how he was referring to himself. So here the Tathagata was born is the first. Here the Tathagata attained supreme enlightenment is the second. Here the Tathagata set in motion the wheel of the Dharma is the third. Here the Tathagata attained parinirvana without remainder is the fourth. Attaining parinirvana without remainder is to die. So that was the fourth. The Buddha goes on, and Ananda, the faithful, while making the pilgrimages to these shrines with a devout heart, will, at the breaking up of the body after death, be reborn in a heavenly world. So I think the Buddha made a promise there. If you go to visit these holy sites from events in his life, you will be reborn in a heavenly world. So the Buddha was suggesting that he could be found wherever he had been in this world. And there's a sense in which when we go on pilgrimage, we walk with him, we breathe with him, we meet him. And even today, going on pilgrimage can have that flavor of really being close to the Buddha and the Buddha's living presence on the earth. So the Buddha's life itself traces a spiritual path. So in that sense was a pilgrimage in itself. We are born into samsara, this world of woe. We find release from suffering. we pass the way on to others, share it with others. And when we can no longer help here, we set it all down and let others pick it up, just as the Buddha did at his death. And by visiting these sites, we are ourselves reenacting this path, just as we enact it in our practice every minute of the day, every minute of every day. And so throughout the ages, there have been Buddhist pilgrims. I want to mention a couple of famous ones. One was Ashoka, to whom we owe a great deal. He was a great king who converted to Buddhism after waging a genocidal war and vowed to travel after that only on pilgrimage and never again for war. So he traveled on pilgrimage, marking the important places in the Buddha's life with what are now called Ashoka's pillars, and building great stupas on these sites. There was also a great Chinese monk scholar pilgrim named Xuanzang, who lived in the 7th century. He traveled 10,000 miles over 16 years on foot, mind you, maybe also on horse, and left written records of where these sites were and what they looked like when he visited them. So without these two pilgrims and the records that they left for us, we might not know where these events had actually happened. Ashoka's pillars, were made of granite or marble, and so were very permanent. Most of them have been broken up, but they've been reconstructed, and they have these, inscriptions on them that identify the place where they are. So we could say that pilgrimage spread the Buddha Dharma in those early days. It begs the question, today, if we go on pilgrimage, do we find the Buddha? Is pilgrimage different from just another tourist trip? And if it's different, how is it different? Can pilgrimage be an inner journey as well as an outer one? And does it change us? Does it matter? Does it change us? Does it matter? There's much to be said for physically touching these very places where the Buddha walked. And this is something I was very aware of on that first pilgrimage. The Buddha was here 2,500 years ago. To know the rocks and soil and the quality of the air, to touch them with our own bodies. Have these places not retained some extraordinary energy, not just from the Buddha walking there, but from the stupas built and the devotion of all those who have come afterwards to pay their respects? The pilgrimage texts say that the sight of these shrines, quote, should not arouse craving, nor the pleasure and excitement of sightseeing, but rather the awakening of virtuous potential in our mind stream. The sight of these shrines should awaken virtuous potential in our mind stream. The Dalai Lama says, it develops a strong sense of compassion. One should be a better person when one returns. Otherwise, it's a waste of time and money. So he put it straightforwardly. I think if pilgrimage is successful, if I may use that word, it leads the outward journey leads to inward change. As another pilgrim put it, the place where a Buddha attains enlightenment is unique in the world. The place where he sat, the tree that sheltered him, the area around which he walked, becomes charged with the energy of awareness, the dynamism of the awakened state, the magic and power of his realization. Visiting such a place, making such a connection, has the power to transform a life and perhaps many lives to come. Now, I find that to be a rather extraordinary uh, comment. You know, for so many pilgrims, in so many of their accounts, the experience is life-altering. And then there's me. And I'm wondering if this experience is life-altering and have I changed? And I'm not sure that I have, to be honest with you. You know, for me, these are trips of a lifetime, and I am so grateful for them. And there's a sense in which I could actually take it or leave it. And that's a rather crude way to put it, but it's kind of like I'm fine if I go and I'm fine if I don't go. And it didn't seem to matter whether I went or not. Now, needless to say, I was very much looking forward to going, but nonetheless, I had this question of, well, you know, do I really need to go? It's wonderful to do, but do I really have to go anywhere? You know, as the rules for meditation says, it is futile to travel to other dusty countries, thus forsaking your own seat. Was I forsaking my own seat? Now, even so, I have to tell you that when I entered the Mahabodhi temple at Bodh Gaya, which is the site of the Buddha's enlightenment, and that's the first site that we visited on this trip, I was hit over the head by the power of the place. And I stood there at the entrance and I just sobbed. There was something about it that just really got me, you know. It's such a powerful place, and there I was in that place. And the same thing happened at Kushinagar where the Buddha died. I just stood there and sobbed and sobbed. And about the Dalai Lama, you know, for me, it wasn't so much what he taught while I was there as simply that I saw him, that I saw his body. I saw him get out of a stretched golf cart kind of thing. And I just started sobbing. And this really surprised me about myself because I thought I would be more interested in the teachings than in the person. Um, you know, and I'd be happy just watching him on YouTube, you know, but seeing him in person was really completely different. And I don't know if one can put anything like, you know, something like that in words, but he, to me, embodies joy and kindness, compassion. And, you know, I mean, you all know what he's like. He's so joyful and he's so kind. And this is what I wish to become. Honestly, you know, those are my priorities in this life. And to see a human being who had actually done this in the face of phenomenal adversity was a great inspiration to me. It gave me hope and it strengthened my aspiration. And I was flooded with gratitude. Which leads me to devotion, because the thing that really struck me in these pilgrimage sites and seeing the Dalai Lama was the devotion of my fellow pilgrims. Now, you know, 99% of them or more, 99.9% of them are Asian. And the Asians have a way with devotion that's quite phenomenal. And they come to these sites and they bow and they touch their head to the foot of the Buddha, or they reach to touch this robe that's covering his body. And they chant and they circumambulate the shrines with their hands in gasho. And they're so moved by it all, and they are so faithful, so devout, And I don't think of myself as a very devout person. So I find this really striking. There's an incredibly great faith that's expressed through their devotion. And there's a very strong power that comes from so many people together tending towards the good, if I can put it that way, tending towards the good, just putting their minds in the place, in the, in the place of the Dharma, of the Buddha and what he taught. And all of them together, they come in droves, they come in tour buses, and it's so powerful. And as I said, I don't think of myself as a very devout person, but if I reflect on what devotion really is, it's showing respect. It's honoring. It's demonstrating appreciation. It's expressing gratitude. More than anything, it's expressing gratitude, and it arises out of humility. And, all those things are important to me. So from that point of view, devotion, I find, can be a very helpful teaching, and points me, at least, in a direction I want to be going in. It really exemplifies what we're trying to cultivate in our practice, respect, honoring, gratitude. So it's a kind of giant finger pointing at the moon of liberation. And we might do well to follow the finger. And when we show respect, we can't defile. And I think that's really important, that when we turn towards respect, defiling drops off. And there's a very kind of literal demonstration of that. I had been in India in the 1980s, and I hadn't been back since. And when I was in India in the 1980s, I stood on the banks of the Ganges and watched dogs tearing apart a human body in the river. The river was full of garbage, full of carcasses, both human and non-human. And when I saw the Ganges this time, there was no garbage in it, and there were no corpses in it. And it was really surprising. And I asked about this, and I was told that Modi, who is the Prime Minister of India, had told the people that you don't defile your sacred river. The Ganges is a sacred river. You don't defile it. You don't put garbage in your sacred river. So they stopped. And I don't know if that's the whole story, but I thought it was a telling story. There's an inner shift, that creates a better world when we recognize the sacred. And when millions of people have conveyed this kind of devotion in one spot over millennia, then it really does become a powerful spot, and it does change one internally. I'm still not sure that it changed me, but I think it has that potential. Another thing about pilgrimage is that it's a literal enactment of walking the path of training. And, you all know, I'm sure, that in Buddhism, path's a well-used, often used metaphor. Most obviously, the Noble Eightfold Path. Or we say, walking the way of the Buddha, or following the path, or following the way with a capital W, capital P, path. And the sutras list a number of ways to do this, but ultimately it's the way we practice. Ceaseless, endless training. A path implies that we begin somewhere and go somewhere, end up somewhere we intend to end up. It's a clear space that allows us to go easily without obstruction. You know, like in a forest that's cluttered with undergrowth, the path takes us through. So it allows us to go easily without obstruction. Now, pilgrimage can be easy or hard, or both. For me, really, it was easy when you think about it. For Xuanzang in the 7th century, it was pretty hard. You know, and he almost died or got killed a number of times along the way. It was quite the journey. He was traveling from China. So it has easy moments and it has hard moments. It can disappoint us, it can bore us, it can exhilarate us, all of that. And so can the Buddhist path. The Buddhist path which leads, this is the path that leads from suffering to the end of suffering. We begin in suffering, we end up without suffering, from ignorance to awakening, to enlightenment. Part of the pilgrimage is losing the path and refining the path. I, not too long ago, read a book by a woman who hiked 1,100 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail alone. And it appeared at the end of the book that nothing other than the outer physical journey changed her utterly as a human being. She just kept walking. And, you know, one grueling mile after another, and she just kept doing it. And at the end, she kind of looked up and she was someone completely different from the person who had started out, and for the better. And how do we explain that, you know? Sometimes I think pilgrimage works unseen in us and changes things we can't know of. So in that sense, I don't worry too much about whether it changed me or not. I just hope it had a good effect somehow. And I think, you know, that undeniably a pilgrimage to India can strengthen our connection to the path. So I would say, take the trip. But I would also say, don't take the trip. You know, Tibetans imprisoned by the Chinese can still practice, though they can go nowhere. Perhaps the pilgrimage can be done without moving our bodies. Is Zazen a pilgrimage? We don't need to travel to other dusty countries because we already have it all right here. We're already practicing. Our daily life is the path. Through our daily life, we follow the path laid out in the life of the Buddha. So through our daily life, we're mirroring the path of the life of the Buddha. We travel from suffering to the end of suffering. Maybe just for 1 second, but we still go there. From ignorance to awakening. And there's the possibility of devotion in every moment. There is nothing we can't be humble before. Respect and honor. Be kind to, compassionate towards, be grateful for. There is nothing we cannot be grateful for. And I really can't emphasize this enough. There is not one thing or one moment of the day that is not our practice. Nothing is ever missing. So both practice and pilgrimage, or practice pilgrimage, is boundlessly profound. There's no bottom to it. There's no end. There's no arrival. You know, Dogen said the journey is hindered by arrival. We just keep walking. And when you can feel the story, you know it's true. This is a couple of lines from Ali Cobb Eckermann's poem, Kulila. Now, I don't know how it is I ran into Ali Cobb Eckermann's poem, Kulila. I've never heard of Ali Cobb Eckermann, But he or she said, when you can feel the story, you know it's true. And I would say that pilgrimage is feeling the story, not saying it in words, but doing it with your body. And this is different from reading a book. And I think that's important. But I want to ask one last set of questions. What if neither pilgrimage nor the path of practice change us? What if we don't change? Can we be content with that? Is it enough? Can we be grateful? Is Zazen really good for nothing? And I'm going to stop there.